Together, Christians forced their version of God into the Pledge of Allegiance in the 1950s. A lot of people think it's been there forever. It just got there in the 50s. Most of when, a lot of our parents were growing up. Together, Christians forced their version of God into our national motto despite the Constitution. Together, Christians keep voting to ban gay marriage and limit women's rights. Together, Christians made it illegal for atheists to run for public office in 7 states, including this one. And together, a lot of atheists sit and watch this happen. People keep asking, why do you care? Why does it matter? It seems like we're the only ones not standing up, but when we do, a lot of times it's in a negative way, right? We get a lot of the negative media. And also, when you try to come up with some sort of creed, or hey guys, here's how you should do it, or here's how you shouldn't do it, it's like, hey, whoa, we're not a religion, chill out, So I get that. But we want to keep in mind, there is one overall goal, and that's to increase civil rights, right, of non-believers. Why get involved? Why vote? Why be involved with politics at all? Because silence is acceptance. Take a little break to tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, my girlfriend at the time was a little younger than me, and she went to a party that I wanted no part of because I was a senior, and she was a sophomore. And she finished the party and came over and said, oh yeah, this guy Hayes, he slapped me on the butt. And I perked up and I said, well, what'd you do about it? What'd you say? Nothing. All the guys in here are like, oh man, you don't say anything, what does that mean? And I tried to tell her, look, you didn't stand up against him, you told him that was good, you told him that was okay. She's like, whatever. I started to think, wait a minute. I realized she thinks it's okay. 3 weeks later, we were in an argument, she went to a party, slept with him. I knew that silence was acceptance. Her lack of opposition to that advance showed him and me that she was okay with it. And as long as we stay quiet while our rights are being taken, while our civil liberties are being infringed upon, and other people's civil liberties are being infringed upon, we're telling the religious right it's okay. So will your organization be a support group for sad atheist outcasts? Do you want to cry? Do you want to say, yeah, it really sucks, I hate living with my parents, they're jackasses, makes me angry? Or this would be an activist group making a difference and inspiring young minds to think for themselves. This is a very important point for me. Discussions are not confrontations. Don't think that because you engage someone in a rational discussion about religion that you're confronting them. It doesn't have to be an argument. I've owned Dogma Debate since 2008. It's dogmadebate.com. And more people, Christians mostly, come to my site to comment, thank you for having a place where we can come safely, have rational discourse without things getting nasty. That's what I pride and decide on. And when people do get nasty, and a lot of times it's Christians, but sometimes atheists too, or Muslims or whatever, I'll delete the comment or respond to them in a way to show them I'm not going to tolerate that. Because we're not going to get anywhere like that, right? But Aristotle said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Understand where they're coming from. Entertain their thought. Entertain their idea. But you don't have to accept it. But it doesn't mean you're being confrontational and starting a fight. It's okay to disagree. Just remember that when you do this, to be respectful. Human nature encourages reciprocation. If I yell at you, you're going to yell back. If I call you names, you're going to shut down and withdraw. But if I'm understanding, and I'm open to your ideas, you're probably going to be open to mine. It's just basic human nature. Read and understand group psychology. Anybody taking psych courses in here?
Taking 2 of them.
Oh, cool. So have you crossed group psychology? I know people in general kind of know what it means. Take a moment to read up on it. There's a specific section in my book where I deal with group psychology, the term Freud coined. It's really important to understand when dealing with anybody that's been indoctrinated, because, and then this is the third point, and here's where I slightly disagree with Dave Silverman's, he's the president of American Atheists. I slightly disagree with his comment. He said on CNN the other day that he respects people, but he doesn't respect religion. And I disagree that that's even possible. Because when you look into group psychology, and the point that I made very clearly in my book by quoting other people who research group psychology, is that when a person joins a group like that, they allow pieces of the group to replace pieces of themselves.
It becomes part of
They become part of the group becomes part of them. Exactly. And for example, at a football game, you see guys completely, with no shirts on, giant H, L, and the letters written on their chest. The guy would never walk alone like that, like into the grocery store. You know what I mean? But the mentality of the group's ego replaces his own. So he effectively becomes part of that group. So when that group gets insulted, when that group is attacked, it makes the group tighter, more close-knit. They withdraw into one another. You cannot attack a person's religion and think they're not going to take it personally. Most free thinkers, agnostics, atheists, we can separate. We can separate from that and say, yeah, this is the individual that you are. This is the jersey that you put on as part of your team. They don't see it that way. It is very much a part of them. So we've got to be respectful, at least not to the craziness that they practice. We don't have to be respectful to that, but just to the fact that they hold it close to them. If we attack it, they will withdraw. Understand the social pressures of religion. Most people in here probably were raised to be believers of some kind, just like I was. And it's important to understand that even when people stop believing, they continue to participate in the social events that are related to church. Choirs, musicians, Sunday lunches after church. These are all very much social events related to religion. And a lot of the campaigns, like the billboards out by American Atheists, tend to presume that someone's going to say, oh, cool billboard, I'm out, not going to go to church, not going to come to the family dinner, and by the way, it's a myth, and I'm going to join this group now. It doesn't work that way. It's a very long process, and we've got to be sensitive to that. And just be sensitive also to the fact that many believers are afraid even to admit that they've had similar doubts. Believe it or not, most of the people you talk to and engage, when you bring up certain points, they don't want to admit it, but they've thought about a lot of this stuff too. They really have. And it scares the crap out of them. It really does. And if we come at them fires blazing and, hey, idiot, wake up, that's not the way to do it, right? These people are terrified because they've invested so much of their life into something that they've had doubts about already. And now here's another rational person making something of themselves, also disagreeing with something that they hold very close to. Also be understanding, grasp the concept of indoctrination. You guys get that already. Support the person's constitutional right to be theologically wrong. It's okay. I've always said, and I said this in my speech in 2010 when I was addressing the State Board of Education, that if they outlawed Christianity, this is not a popular thing among a lot of atheists, but if they outlawed Christianity tomorrow, I would be on the picket lines protesting that Christians have the right to be theologically wrong. They do. It would be unconstitutional for our government to do that. And first and foremost, I'm about civil rights, which is why I talk about women's rights, talk about gay rights. It's mostly about civil rights. We are just a group that is long forgotten a lot of times. It's still okay to make fun of us publicly. Show respect even when it's not deserved, because we don't need anger and insults when we're right. A lot of atheists disagree with this. A lot of atheists, and right now I've got an open letter to American atheists on my website, dogmatobig.com. It's called To American Atheists on the right side if you want to go check it out. And it's basically where I'm talking to Dave Silverman and American Atheists about their billboards and how they're being insulting and how they're going to make people shut down. And some people are coming in to the website saying, no, if they disrespect me, they deserve it. Sure, if your goal is to have a fight. But what's our goal? To continue the fight, to perpetuate the anger, to perpetuate the negative reputation atheists have, or to get across to somebody and make a difference. Know the Bible and pose your arguments as questions they have to answer. This is by far one of the most effective tactics. Ask questions so that they lead themselves to not believing. I'm not saying your job is to deconvert. I'm saying your job is to explain atheism, and I'll get into that in a moment. But just as with any psychology session, you've got a therapist they don't sit and preach to you or talk to you about how to fix your problems. They don't tell you, here's what you need to do, step 1, step 2, step 3. A lot of people misunderstand that about therapy and psychologists. What they do is they ask you questions. How do you feel about that? What do you think you could have done better? Why does that strike you as being weird? Do you believe that? Engaging the believers in questions, general, rational discourse, will make them wonder, yeah, why does that? Why is that happening? You don't want them to leave holding onto their Bible for dear life, running from you. You want them to leave scratching their head going, I never knew that was in the Bible. Right? But if you know it, and you pose these things as questions, they will go look it up. Sometimes people buy the book and email me and say things, they're very angry. They say things like, I don't know what to do now. I read your book, I looked up the scriptures, I've always taken it for granted, I've always just believed, now I don't, I'm terrified, what now? What now, genius? Okay, fine, I don't. Now what? What now? And they're angry with me. And I tell them, read the Bible. I'm not kidding. Because I don't want you to say, yeah, that guy David Smalley led me to this question. No, my book is not for that. My book is to lead you to researching your own truth. And I just want to spark people to take that journey. People who refuse to are the ones that are kind of frustrated, right? Finally, and this is this last one is really effective. It's sort of a method that I developed to avoid trying to appear to be some sort of religion, and we'll get into that as well in a second. But you can always tell when the believer is becoming frustrated, because they will drop all arguments and say things like, why are you trying to make me an atheist? What's wrong if I believe? They're running out of arguments. And so the point is to respond with, no, you can't. You can continue to. I'm not trying to deconvert you. I'm not trying to make you agnostic. I'm not trying to make you atheist. I'm trying to explain to you that atheists are still good people. And we can have morality, we can have ethics, we can continue to be successful and raise good children, and we can understand good and bad and how not to punch each other without the concept of a God. And taking the approach that you're explaining unbelief or non-belief rather than trying to pull someone out of their own, you being in that mindset will make you much more effective in your discussions with believers. Before we get into the common arguments, I just wanted to stop and take a moment and see if anyone had any questions about what I've said so far. Not even you?
I have a question. Okay. You're saying about earlier they have the right to be wrong. Where's the line for that? Because there's cults that are harmful to other people, and exactly when they're oppressive to other people.
You're exactly right. And that's a really good question. I think that we can say until they're hurting someone else, but most of them, mentally anyway, are hurting their children. Right? They're making scientific education more difficult in the long run. I was blasted on a news story one time my statement was sort of taken out of context. He said that I said Christian daycare centers were child abuse. And oh man, the hate mail poured in. You won't believe what these Christians wanted to do to me when I said that. But the reality was, what I was saying is that even just your average Christian who drops their child off at Christian daycare in the morning, they don't realize that point in brain development is very important for a child's learning ability. And instead of using that to teach the child math and science and things like that, they're coloring a picture of Moses or Noah and an ark and dinosaurs. They're not really using that. Do I think that's abusive? I do. But criminally? No. As far as I'm concerned, they're allowed to have their beliefs, and unfortunately, they're allowed to continue to teach their children those types of things, and I think they should continue to be able to. I don't see how our government could step in and say, it is illegal for you to tell your child anything. You know what I mean? I don't know, that's a rough one. But I guess as long as everyone's consenting adults, and no one's being hurt, and no one's civil liberties are being violated, to me that would be the line. Yes, sir?
So I understand your point about not being aggressive towards believers because that just creates more of a fight, not a discussion, but don't you think we're being a bit too fair to theistic peoples?
In what way?
Well, I mean, just for me, I would say that religion in and of itself is a cult. And so I think that it's like, we don't call them a cult because we're trying to be fair to them because they're Christians. It's like they have this safeguard from ever being called a cult. Like some people would argue Scientology is a cult. Others would argue it's not a cult, it's a religion. So for me, personally, I think we're just being too fair, whether it's Scientologists, whether it's Christians, and just personally, it's like, I understand, what he was probably talking about as far as cults that endanger people directly with the whole, mass suicides, which is what most, Christians don't do. But at the same time, just because they don't kill off all their members, I would still say that it is a mentally damaging thing in and of itself. And the fact that people are like, whoa, now that's a religion. You can't say that about religion. They would never do that. I just think that we're being, as a culture, too fair to any faith, not just Christianity, any faith, really. So I'm asking for your opinion.
No, absolutely. What is the difference between a cult and a religion, in your opinion?
Well, basically, I think that...
About 2,000 years. 10 base.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, just because they're both
A cult is just a small religion. And a religion is a largely accepted cult. I don't think that is an attack on religion. I've said that, and it's in that book. I think saying that is a scientific fact. When you look at the definitions of what the words mean, they called Mormonism a cult for a couple of hundred years, and now it's a religion. But to your point on being too fair to them, are you saying that
to me,
we shouldn't be angry with them?
Like, it's one of those things where it's like, I think you should just call something what it is, kind of like how, we shouldn't call evolution by natural selection a theory. I think that's kind of like, we call it a theory.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let me say this. We don't refrain from insulting religions because they deserve some sort of special respect or, I don't know, some sort of being easy on them. We refrain from doing it because it's not going to get us anywhere. That's my point. It's not that I'm saying to protect them because they're special people. They're not. What I'm saying is it's not an effective way of getting our point across. Even though it may be accurate, whatever you're saying, yes, it's a fairy tale, yes, it's a myth. Okay, we can discuss that amongst our videos and in our meetings. But when you tell an individual directly, everything that you've put your life into is a myth and a fairy tale, they're going to shut down. So you can attack them if you like, but you're going to find yourself not being very successful in getting your point across. I think that's a common misunderstanding. I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of people that come to the site say the same thing. They deserve it. I agree. They do deserve it. And are they abusive to a lot of people? Yes. My car has the atheist license plate. Only one in Texas. I've been walking with my daughter into a restaurant and had a woman scream out, "You're going to hell!" I said, "Thank you."
I'm going to steal that license plate, by the way.
Are you? So, yes, they're abusive. Yes, they take it too far. But if I were to scream something back at her, we would just both be angry. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's really the point.
And at least one of you should follow Jesus' advice and turn the other cheek.
You talked about people who comment to your site and say that, now what? Should we have like a support system for new atheists that don't know how to live their life now?
You know what? I mean, I've written some pieces of that in the book as well. Now what do? I don't know that we can provide step by step without appearing to be a religion. But are there leaders out there that can lead you in the right direction, help you make decisions, help you deal with internal problems that are not believers? Yes, most of them are called psychologists. There are groups like this, and that's what I hope this develops into, is people out there walking around the campus, start seeing that it's okay not to believe. I think that's the first step. It's okay. Look, I'm not, with long fingernails and a tail hissing at you. I'm an average guy in a standard car. Don't do that to me. And I'm just this average guy walking around, and it's okay to not have a belief.
depends on how religious.
Yeah,
they
but
are.
the
They're
truth
like-
is, this is true to some degree. Some atheists are. And
But that comes with the territory.
See,
In
not
the sense,
necessarily. I disagree.
in the sense that you can't align perfectly with them because what they believe doesn't make sense to you. So
So that's just a
No, I
disagreement,
don't-
not
I
necessarily
don't
a
think
tolerance.
you're
Yeah, I don't align myself with Philadelphia Eagles fans, but I understand they have a right to be wrong about,
The reason that a lot of atheists are intolerant of religion and religious people is because we look at how much harm it's done, like, AIDS in Africa.
And I think a lot of us grew up in that.
Yeah, like,
I think that's what I was about to say. I think that a lot of atheists are pissed off when they realize the truth. They feel like they've been lied to, they've been deceived, they've been betrayed their entire lives. And that's why, as a parent, I continue my streak of not lying to my daughter. And sometimes it's very difficult. Daddy, is the shot going to hurt? Yeah, sweetie, it's going to hurt. I'm like, it's going to hurt. And we talked about it for 4 or 5 days leading up. It's going to hurt. But I would explain to her why it was kind of necessary for her health. And she prepared herself mentally. And I was so proud of her. She's 5 years old. She's sitting up on this little doctor's table. And the doctor says, look up there and tell me what you see. My daughter looks up and says, I know you're going to poke me. And she says, well, okay. And she did it, and she didn't cry. She sat there. She took it because it wasn't a shock. It's the ones that go, no, sweetie, it won't hurt at all. Look, a unicorn. Hey, Mom!
what have you done?
Yeah, and then parents wonder why they turn 13 and lie to us every day, right? Because we've taught them that that's the way to interact.
And Santa.
Well, right. This can be a problem. It can be sort of a cancer running through the atheist community as we try to make our case that we're decent people with a different opinion and that we will stand up for our civil rights. We won't allow you to continue to make laws restricting people of their freedoms and civil liberties. We can't continue with this type of reputation, which is why I spent the whole part of this discussion talking about good approaches. I'm not saying to be a pushover. Please don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying is to understand that these people live and die for this stuff. And just the fact that we exist and disbelieve in something that they put their entire life into, our existence alone is offensive to them. It is. And, some atheists are like, so what? That's your problem. And that's fine. I think atheists have the right to be that way. But I just think you will be far less effective with that type of attitude. So be tolerant of their ignorance of what they claim to believe in. Because that's really what it boils down to. Everybody I know that actually spent the time to read the Bible and do the research stopped believing it. Every single person.
So are we supposed to tolerate ignorance then? Is that what you're saying? Because
Well, I guess encourage them to do the research.
Mhm.
And if you're screaming, hey, idiot, look up the Bible verse, they're not going to. But if you say, did you know it says this? It was kind of shocking to me. And you ask it in a question, and you're a little passive with it, they may go, I didn't realize that. Let me go check that out.
Yeah, but you have to understand these are Americans who barely even vote in their elections.
True.
American Idol is on, and I think they'd rather watch that than go look up something about their religion that they already know is correct. They know they're right.
Yeah,
They know you're wrong.
I'm not saying not to argue with passion. I'm not saying don't stand your ground. I'm not saying no satire ever. I do that in radio. I had an interview live with Osama bin Laden from hell. Okay, I'm okay with joking about religion. It's okay to some degree.
How is he?
In these, what's that?
How is he?
Yeah, he's good. He's good. It's important to remember that. It's important to remember your goal. If your goal is to fight, then fight. But if your goal is to be effective, if your goal is to change minds, if your goal is to leave them walking away with an open mind, insulting them is just not going to do it. Everything dealing with interpersonal relationships and conflict resolution says that insulting and yelling and being nasty is going to make the person shut down and withdraw. That's just basic human biology. That's just the way we are.
And
Do you have a question?
Or I was just gonna say, like, the thing that I cannot stand about, highly religious people is their intolerance and their hate. And so that's the thing that I cannot stand when that's our approach to talking to, highly religious people, is to just throw that back at them and tell them they're stupid and all that kind of stuff. And so that's why I don't,
So if they're being that way, why not respond with, you're being very intolerant right now. You're not being very understanding of what I'm trying to talk to you about.
Because sometimes they don't care because they're 100% certain that they're right.
That's fine. But continue with the questions. If they're 100% right, they should know their stuff, right?
They don't have to. They don't have to.
That's
know
my
if
point.
they-
That's my point. Is to point out by asking questions. You're not telling them you're an idiot. By asking questions, you're letting them prove to themselves they're an idiot.
Oh, I know.
Because they can't answer.
I know so many of them. I mean, that worked for me, but I was religious, but I was really very critical. But for a lot of people that I know, especially in my youth group, I did check the same thing with them, and they didn't care. They heard the questions, they knew it was insane, and I have a friend who, she knows it's insane.
You actually
but
talked about
it
this in
is
your
her
book,
religion.
that when you would go to talk to people at your church, and you were not an atheist technically, but you were asking questions that they were like, you're a heathen, like, why are you even asking these questions?
Yeah, 'cause
So yeah, there's going to be
questions are
some
evil.
people, there's going to be some people
Right.
that aren't going to,
Right, and
Go with
it's
it.
okay to approach someone, have a discussion, and continue walking away not agreeing. But what you don't want them to walk away with, kind of to your point back there, is you don't want them to walk into church and go, man, I met this atheist, he was such an ass. Just yelling at me. They're not going to admit that they started it or that they acted the same way. They're just going to talk about, hey, you know what? Everybody's been right about atheists all along. They're impatient, know-it-all pricks that yell back at me. That's all I'm saying.
4 of those things.
Well, my point is really that whether you're angry or nice or whatever, a lot of these people, the
Lost
discussion
causes.
it's going to be fruitless.
Sometimes.
sometimes it seems that way though. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people said it was fruitless talking to me.
Continue.
That's kind of my point, is that it's a long process. Don't think that you're going to deconvert somebody in a yelling session or a conversation. You just plant the seeds, you talk to them, you start by helping them understand where you're coming from, that you're a non-believer and that's okay. And that you're okay with being a non-believer, and you're okay with people knowing that you're a non-believer. It's the number one reason I had my license plate put on. Not once ever have I had any vandalism in a year. And everybody keeps thinking,
Yeah.
I know, it's really, but I get a lot of thumbs up. I get a lot of husbands in the passenger seat going, his wife's driving with the, the rosary hanging from
There's a website that sells like the Darwin fish for like the back of your car.
I've got one
And
of
you
those
can
too.
buy replacement feet because they get snapped off so
Oh
often.
gosh. Right.
I'll tell you, my mother is probably the most religious person I know. And me being an atheist, I think, made her that way. She was just kind of growing up. And when I went this way, she's like, I'm going to get my son back. Because I never got that way, because I didn't throw out the insults, I wasn't always perfect, but for the most part, I didn't throw out the insults, and I stayed understanding and inquisitive about how she could wrap her head around talking snakes and donkeys and strange things. When she would hear a preacher say something that really didn't make sense to her, I was the one she called. She puts up this front on the internet, she'll blast me on the internet all the time, and then I'll go have dinner with her. We have this battle, like on Facebook, and then she'll come back and ask me questions. One time she called me, she's like, David, I've got this question for you, I can't wrap my head around this. I said, what is it? She said, well, God said, have no other gods before him, right? I said, yeah. She said, but Jesus said the only way to get to the Father is through me. So, isn't that like putting a God before God? I'm freaked out, man. Like, I know.
Jesus is God, but also not God.
He's also not God. But
Little
he's also
question,
then,
son of God.
then there's the Holy
So that's what I'm
Ghost.
saying. These believers have their own doubts. They have their own set. And I've got friends that are preachers, because me and preachers are some of the few humans on the planet that can talk about religion for hours without the rest of the world, as they're glazing over, we're interested in it. And when it hits the fan in their lives, and when things go downhill, and they can't turn to anyone, and they've made a giant mistake, they've gone on an alcoholic binge, or punched their sister, or done something because they're human and fallible, and they made a mistake, they don't call their preacher friends for support, because they're just going to be judged. They call me. Hey man, I know you're not going to judge me, I got to tell you what happened. I need a buddy to go out with and talk to for a minute. Because I've been that guy. Because I've allowed them to do their yelling and their damnation, preaching, and I took it. it takes some patience, and I haven't always been perfect. But being that guy, because like you said, when they have questions, they'll realize that you are tolerant, and you will set an example for their intolerance to start to change. And to me, that's really the point. Okay, so this one's really hard to answer. Why do you hate God? It's really hard to answer without being offensive. And so your tone and approach is everything. Before I tell you what I say,
I'm always sarcastic with this one. I say, like, why do you hate Voldemort?
Why do you hate the Loch Ness Monster?
Okay.
Or,
Why do you hate
What
freedom?
if they say I don't? Then you say?
Me either.
Exactly.
Well, I think this is a really difficult question to answer because it's like, your first instinct is, I don't hate God, I don't believe that God exists. You're dumb if you think I hate God, but then you also think, like, the character of God in the Bible really isn't a nice person, and so, yeah, in a way I kind of do, just like you said, like, I hate Voldemort too, even though he's fictional, so,
Actually, I don't like Voldemort. He's pretty cool.
He has no nose.
Dude,
That's the worst thing about it.
he's like, hey, you have something I want. A nose?
Really? So,
Continuing. I said there's I don't believe in God, therefore I don't hate him.
right.
But then, according to your beliefs, I would hate.
So I wouldn't even go down that road, personally, and I wouldn't even answer the question the same way they've asked it here. Because by saying I don't hate God, you are inadvertently implying that a God exists.
So you just say I don't believe?
Well, what I would say is it's impossible for me to have any anxiety or hate or animosity towards something that I don't acknowledge as existing. And in that tone. Or not, I don't hate your stupid God, I just don't believe in it. See what I mean? I'm saying the same thing. One makes them shut down and one makes them go, oh yeah. And then sometimes, and they really don't like it when you compare God, their God, to leprechauns or unicorns and things like that. Or Voldemort. But I typically use the analogy, I can't hate the Christian God, and I speak that way on purpose. I can't hate the Christian God any more than you could hate leprechauns. And typically I'll say, I'm not trying to offend you, but the reality is, I'm not angry. I don't hate the Christian God. I don't acknowledge the Christian version of God. And also what I talk about in the book is a concept I got from Dr. David Eller, who actually wrote my foreword. Huge hero of mine. The guy's brilliant. He's an anthropologist. He warns people from speaking Christian.
From saying God instead of
Saying
Christian.
yeah, saying God with capital G.
See,
From using words like angels and spirits and devil interchangeably with Satan. And just assuming that these things are real because we've been taught it most of our lives, except the lucky one back there. It's really hard. It's really hard not to. What's that?
Just from watching all the non-real atheist videos I've taken to calling him Yahweh out of habit.
You can. And I said, I kind of got slapped on the hand. I was on, what is that? KCBI with Dr. Barry Creamer. You guys heard him? Mm-hmm. It's the you know what I'm talking about, the preacher on the FM radio here in Dallas. He at Criswell College, and I said on there, I forget what it was now, but I kind of got slapped on the hand because I mentioned something about leprechauns or unicorns, and I said I realize that Yahweh is a character in a book called the Bible, and he got extremely angry. I mean, he didn't visibly, but he was turned a little bit red and didn't like it, So, and that's the truth, and that's another thing I want to point out. If the truth pisses them off, it's okay. I'm not saying that never make them upset. I'm just saying, if you state a fact and the fact makes them angry, there's nothing you can do about that. But just make sure it's the fact, right? Make sure it's real and not just some angry opinion that you're pulling out to upset them. So to me, I won't even speak Christian and answer the question. And I've taught my daughter, whenever people ask her, she'll say, they ask me if I believe in God. She's like, well, Daddy, I don't, but I don't want them to be mad at me. What do I say? I said, say which one. What's wrong with that? Because that'll make them think. You're not being angry toward them. Which one? God, go ask your parents which one you mean and talk to me tomorrow. My daughter says this to people now. Which God are you talking about? And then when they come back and say, oh, the God of the Bible, are you sure they don't mean Zeus? Ask them. And we've got a list of 10,000 she can go through, right, every day, to where the kid's like, forget it, let's go play on the jungle gym. Who cares? But to me, I just warn against letting them put you into the Christian conversation with God being real, right, and yes or no if you believe He exists or not, because then you're losing that already. So my response, is that I couldn't have any sort of hate towards something that I don't acknowledge its existence, like leprechaun. You're just going through a phase.
No, you.
This probably comes from a lot of parents, and don't think it ends when you're 20 or 25. I'm 32.
And
And
still
I'm still going through a phase. Thank you. Wait, did you mean I'm Okay. So I'm 32, and the other day my mother posted on Facebook, in response to one of my responses, she said, someone's got my son's mind, but God will get it back. And I simply responded, no, someone had my mind, and now I got it back.
Oh, nice.
Right? No anger, using very similar words, making my point. That's really all you can respond to this one. I mean, nothing but time will tell this, right?
Yeah.